Welcome to the Artificiality podcast. I'm Dave.
And I'm Helen.
We are the co-founders of Saunders Scheme. We're very happy to have you with us here today. We're here today to discuss Helen's latest work in Quartz, Q-U-A-R-T-Z, also QZ.com. She wrote an awesome field guide about AI and bias and fairness that has multiple articles. The one we want to talk about today, though, is Are AI Ethicists Making Any Difference? Which is a great topic. You start off the article by talking about there being a rush to hire AI ethicists in tech. Why is that?
Well, the primary goal is, it sort of depends on how cynical you are.
Yeah.
I think in general people are really well-meaning and they see that it's really important to overlay this process and this thought process about fairness and consequences of AI. The more cynical view is that it's a PR and reputational play.
You actually are serving as an AI ethics advisor to a startup. How do you think about that as that sort of conundrum?
In a couple of different ways. First is that the role of, my personal view is that the role of the AI ethicist is one of not making decisions for people. It is actually a role that is about facilitation and is about getting diverse voices at a table and about a process. It is very much a process. And as I say in the piece, there when I was talking to Jake Metcalf from Data and Society, that he says he thinks about ethics as the vessel and values are what goes in that vessel. And he's totally right when he says we're actually quite good at talking about ethics. We're actually quite good at talking about process and structure and operationalizing things. We're not good at talking about values. So to me, the role of the ethicist is to foster that discussion where you talk about values and you open people's eyes to the fact that there is an intention that they have and an intention that the AI has, and then there's outcomes and consequences. And the difference with AI is that those outcomes and consequences aren't always predictable and need to be designed.
So do you think that your view that the role of the AI ethics officer or AI ethicist or whatever the title is, that your view that role is an important facilitator and the person asks questions, is that view commonly held in the tech firms that are hiring these people, or do you think that's a somewhat of a contrarian point of view of the role of an AI ethicist?
I think it is a bit contrarian because we're at the early stages of understanding the role. So at the moment we do have two different sort of ends of the spectrum. You have Google hiring philosophers and you have an in-house philosopher, and that sounds fine, but some of these principles are very abstract and they're really quite difficult. And at the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are really managing AI ethics out of the legal department, and it's a very compliance-driven type of process, and ethics basically means don't break the law. And really what I'm talking about is the piece in the middle, where you're operationalizing some of these abstract principles in ways that real people can have real conversations and make tactical decisions about. Like, they're not necessarily big strategic decisions, because you can write an AI ethics principle that says we're going to be fair. But what does that mean? Does that many models will pit race against gender, and you end up with fairness and race and unfairness and gender. Well, someone's got to resolve that, and that's the role of this process. So I think that when there's a couple of the people that I talked to were quite provocative on this, and when I was talking to Annette Zimmerman in Princeton, she said to me, I said, what do you think of the idea of a Hippocratic oath for data scientists? The do no harm idea. And she said, well, if you don't want to do any harm, don't take the oath. because you can't avoid it. The question is, how do you get a group of people together to have a conversation about, like, what's the minimum harm? Where are the places that you should not deploy AI because you're going to create harm? So those conversations get quite nuanced. And the other, really interesting sort of controversial view is that how do you measure the role, the effect of the ethicist? And I think that's a fascinating.
Yeah. What kind of KPIs do you put in place?
Yeah. Well, then there are some. Yeah, I mean, you can put in all the process ones, right? So we work with people, as you know, on helping people identify where decisions need to get made by who. Now that's standard corporate stuff. We're just doing it in a different subject matter, in a different domain that hasn't existed before. So people need a lot of hand-holding to design that system. But the bigger measure, which I think is actually really important, and was something that came up in the course of these interviews. If you've got an ethics board, say say the one at Facebook, for example, or the one that was dissolved at Google, or whatever the committee is that committee able to look at a decision about an AI product and say, this product needs to be completely redesigned in order for it to meet our ethics standards? Is that something that they theoretically have permission to do? Do they sit in that room and know that that's something that's within their scope? Yes or no? Because that's kind of the big test, if you have to send an entire product line back to the drawing board. Or is it more that they make a tweak on a product, and that product is a little bit better and a little bit fairer? And then the measure there is the benefit for the group that this is acting on, the customer group or the user group, is that benefit bigger than the reputational value of having those people there making that decision?
It's an extraordinarily difficult topic to try and quantify. Right? There isn't a method there. There isn't a measure that you can actually sort of quantify the effect of an ethicist. So how do you measure that? It's interesting too when you talk about whether the ethics board has the power to go in and make a change to a product, or to pull a product from the shelf if it doesn't meet the standards or the values of the company, right? Does their guiding the vessel, the ship of ethics, right? That's holding the values, right? I like the Jake's phrase, the vessel which we use to hold our values. So if they're captaining of the ship, can that derail a product? It's almost like creating a new role, that you are potentially creating a new power dynamic in tech, where you traditionally will have engineering and marketing, whether a product marketing team and a design team that are all collaborating together on what a product will be, and there's pushes and pulls, and in different companies, different groups have more say over the outcome than others. But creating a new field, a new title, and a new organization around ethics potentially creates a fourth group there that I think must be quite difficult for companies to figure out how to manage.
I think that is very difficult, and I did talk to a number of people about the reality of that process. And the reality of that process is that there's an existing power dynamic. It's either in the developed software process, where the development process has project managers and software engineers, and they've got a process that they follow, and there's releases every week or whatever the process is. And this is not a natural fit for that process. Even if people have been doing AI for years, it's still not a natural fit. So there's almost this two-step part. There's what's different about AI, and then there's what's the procedure to put on top of that. And it's very, very difficult to put it into an existing process. And that I guess that process of some people call it activation, that process of getting things into code is quite experimental right now. People are still trying to figure out what makes that additive and expansionary rather than a burden.
Is the power conflict and challenge of fitting it into an organization, is that what's driving the skepticism around AI ethics and this concept of ethics washing? That tech is actually just washing over the problem by putting a name?
Well, at the high level, there's been a couple of big failures, and the Google one is the most high profile. So there's that. But I think that the real ethics washing comes from the fact that this is just a massive culture change, and that it's pretty visible that if you're in these highly market-driven, very competitive, optimizing for one thing, which is kind of the thing about AI, and that you and the power structure in these companies are that the engineers are the heroes. The engineers get to drive this, and that over the top of this is this, let's solve this technology problem with more technology. As an ethicist, where we really don't know what an ethicist looks like. I mean, is an ethicist someone who walks in who's a minority and they're representing the minority, or is an ethicist a professional trained ethicist that's a PhD, or is an ethicist someone who's worked in these cross collaboration type of roles and is actually just really good at facilitating? We don't know what this animal looks like yet, but we do know what the animal of the marketplace looks like, and we do know what the animal of technology looks like. So that's what people look for most of the time.
I love the quote you have in there from Josh Lovejoy when he said that big tech loves to break words, and his prediction that tech is going to break the words ethics and bias. Do you agree with him? Are you on that side of the pessimism that tech is actually going to break the word ethics?
Yeah, I am. I wasn't when we started that conversation, but I was by the end. And one of the reasons I was by the end was because it's coming from both sides. So you mentioned ethics washing. There's this countervailing view of ethics bashing, which is basically all the people who are trained ethicists and have spent their careers in this field. And, it's complex stuff. It's hard. It twists your brain around. And they come at it and go, who are all these rookies making, trying to, it's like, boy, don't they pretend how to do ethics. And I think that's, I'm presenting a little bit of a sort of strong view on that end of things. But I think that it is coming to the point that it will break the word ethics, because people won't know what it means anymore. It'll become like, remember what it was like when we had sustainability and everyone was going to do sustainability? As a word, it became such a dead duck so quickly because people that worked in sustainability lost control of what it actually meant. And I think ethics is going to be more like that, where bias might go the way of agile, where now there's a bias process or whatever. But I think ethics will become a very difficult word because it just sort of collapses under its own weight in the technology sphere.
Not surprising. I would love to have a statistic of the number of people in tech, and especially the number of people in engineering, who took a course, at least one course in philosophy, right? Because what we're sitting here is we're trying to create a mindset, and we're trying to create a standard for a company around this thing called ethics, which is something that, as you say, is a word that people don't really even understand necessarily. They all have their own points of view. And when you actually go through studying philosophy, you'll understand that that's actually one of the core parts of philosophy, is there's so many different points of view. There is no single set of standards. There is no single answer. There is no 1 and 0, on and off. And I think that's very challenging to create a single idea. Now, on the flip side, that's part of the beauty, right? When we talk about it being a vessel to hold values, that vessel can hold whatever values an individual or an organization has. There is no actual single answer how any company should act. The question is, how does the company organize themselves and make the decisions about what to put in that vessel?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that is a unique challenge here is and I, across my career, I really can't think of too many parallels to this. The only one is essentially in HR, but we're talking about machines that have values instantiated in them by people, and that is just sort of a reality, and it's mathematically defined, but not mathematically resolvable. Humans have to sit there and make a decision about what those values are going to be. So, Jake Metcalf is he's really clear. We need to get better at talking about values, and we shouldn't expect a technology solution. We've actually got to have a human solution, and he's quite right. But I'm a real pragmatist on this stuff, that there needs to be a way to have a conversation at the very top of the company, get the executives really, or at the top of government as well, local governments, cities, whatever, school districts, have people at the leadership level really understand how machines learn and why they're different, why AI is different, why it's world creating, why it's not the same as regular old technology, if you like, and then have a set of processes that bring in diverse groups right from the very top of the company to the bottom, and customers, users, people across the supply chain, bring in the voices of the people who are stakeholders in that intelligence, and then translate it into stuff that people know how to deal with, whether it's a checklist. AI ethics checklists are really useful things, and be able to, the jargon is to operationalize that. You actually have to operationalize these decisions, and then let it happen and make sure it happens. So this whole ethics to governance process is just as important.
It seems almost ironic that you're advocating checklists for something that is so abstract as a principle of ethics. You think about philosophers sitting around a cafe, discussing things, the Sartre and Beauvoir and the existentialism, or other people all throughout time sitting and having these very sort of thoughtful conversations, to then try and take that and operationalize it and checklist it seems almost counter to the principles.
Well, maybe if they had, we wouldn't be in this situation
now. Maybe that's true.
No, I think that, there's always a both here.
Yeah, sure.
But the thing is that, you do have limited time. People are ruled by their schedules and their calendars. So if you've got an hour to have a conversation about whether you're going to have the same false positive rate for race or gender, you actually need to get to the bottom of that conversation. So I think that the best way to think about checklists, when we wrote about this, and it's on our public blog, that the most useful way to think about an AI checklist is the scaffolding. It's enough framework to support the conversation, so that you don't have to spend weeks going back and forth, or that you don't go into a white space zone. White space is just the enemy of development, because it means that people aren't actually working together to figure out what the problem is.
I like how you take the concept of the checklist. You talk about it being a priority to develop techniques and practices that extend traditional roles. And I think that's the thing that really clicked for me as I was reading this. Obviously we advocate checklists. We have them, we develop them, we use them for these processes. But it was great to think about the connection between those checklists and why they work. And the key reason that they work is that you're trying to embed these processes and techniques inside traditional roles. So giving people practical processes to work through is the way to bring an ethics decision-making process into the daily work life of all the other people.
Yeah, if I was going to fast forward a year or whatever, I personally don't believe that these ethics boards are much use at all, unless you want to do it for reputational and external oversight perspective, like it's an external thing. So for the big tech companies, maybe. But I think for most companies, what you really need is an AI ethics process that delivers to the leaders the things they need to know. So, if I was CEO of a company that had a number of different AI models out there running, either customer support or inventory management or what have you, or employee hires, there would be key things that I would want to know about how often those models were checked for fairness, the fact that there was a process where we asked for fairness, because if you don't ask for fairness, you won't get it. You'll only get what the AI is optimizing for. And I would want to know how much predictive power we had lost. There are one of the conversations that I had with Michael Kearns in Pennsylvania. He was he sort of outlined when you get to these big models that are making profit and loss kind of like revenue predictions, you can lose millions with the tiniest change in your fairness criteria. So I'd want to know that, but I'd also want to know that how those fairness criteria were performing over time, and what the impact was on different groups.
So I'd like to finish on one other comment from Josh Lovejoy, where he talked about ethics need to be seen not as a philosophical add-on, but as just good design.
No, I love that. I mean, but that's so Josh.
Yes, and it's preaching to the choir.
Yeah, it is a bit. Because we say everyone's an AI designer now. Everyone. If you're a customer facing person in a coffee shop, you're an AI person when it comes to understanding the way that people respond to intelligent machines if you have them as part of your service provision. And I do think that this is once we put these things out and test them and have them running in the wild, good design should deliver this result back to us. So I think that he's reflecting the coalface. He's reflecting what it means to be an AI designer in a company that is constantly looking at tuning and developing, and how do you just make this seamless, which is a huge challenge.
It is. I think it's a great reflection, because tying back to what you said before, there's if you think of ethics as the vessel that holds the values, and a company as a collection of individuals that create the values essentially of the company by being a collection of individuals. Everyone in the company has a say in what those values are that should be embedded in the AI, and because it is something where it's not like it's unlike human employees, where you hire people and they get attracted to your organization because of the values you have. They join, they affect them, but you hire them because they're a good value fit for the company. And AI, you actually have to specify what that value is to it, because it has none on its own.
Yeah,
it gets created. It gets designed.
And there's not a great precedent, right? Here we are arguing about whether or not these pre-recruitment systems are helping with human bias, because the human bias in recruitment is pervasive, but we actually still can't articulate what it is about cultural fit. What is cultural fit? And we used to have a saying in one of the companies I worked in, which it was a FIFO organization: you fit in or you fuck off. And that you can't do that with a machine. You have to make sure it fits in from the start.
That's about the best comment I think we can have to finish this episode.
I wasn't planning on that.
I know.
Now you're going to have to put an E on the podcast.
It'll work out well. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. And please check out the article in Quartz. Again, QZ.com. There's a whole collection of pieces here. It was quite a big piece of work that Helen completed for them. And take a look at all the interesting links in there. There's a lot of great links to great research on this topic. Thanks again, and check us out next week. Take care of each other. It's better than solid state.